Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're working on part 2 of the max effort, max efficiency for the Edelbrock E Force Superchargers that we have on the Corvette. You guys might be wondering, well, what are we working on today? Well, as you guys saw in the previous episode, we did the Camaro lid swap on the E Force behind me. And with that, you know, we were trying to get more air, more cubic volume inside the supercharger chamber. That way you're removing another restriction. Kind of like we were saying that how the ZL1 and CTS-V lid, it's simply just a bigger volume of space. Yes, the intercooler is a little bit different, but I don't think the intercooler is going to impact as much as air volume, because, you know, PSI is pretty much just a restriction, a measure of restriction. So by giving more air volume to get into that chamber before it goes into the intercooler, you know, hopefully that allows the air to drop a little bit and have lower IATs. The second part of this max effort, max efficiency for the E Force Supercharger, what we're going to be working is the inlet side. And like I said previously, PSI is a measure of restriction. We're going to be removing a restriction on the front end of the blower. What are we doing? We're going to be swapping the stock throttle body for a 102 millimeter billet throttle body. Now this throttle body is from ProFlow. I believe they're out of Australia, something like that. And you can get these 102 millimeter throttle bodies for a fair price, I think. And this is 102 millimeter. It's anodized black, and it's all billet aluminum. Now this is the boosted version that they sell. So what we're going to be doing is having more airflow coming into the blower. However, what we're running into is a restriction on the inlet. And I'm going to show you over here. We have done some major surgery on the car. As you guys can see, we're missing something. Little pump on top here. It goes right here. There's a little pulley missing something. You guys might be wondering, saying, what the hell? Well, we removed the blower for a couple projects. The first one is this 102 millimeter throttle body. As you guys can see in front of me, we have the E Force blower off the car, sitting on my little stool slash workbench. We will not be working on it here. We're just trying to get it torn apart to get this inlet off. And what we're going to be doing is enlarging this opening from, I think it's like 92 millimeter. I think I measured it. Yeah, about 92. We'll be opening this up to 102. I know this throttle body opening will open up to that because I've seen Faster Proms. Jeremy Fermato made a post on the Corvette forum a long time ago showing that yes, this will fit and yes, you can port it out. However, the reason we removed the blower from the car is because I didn't want to be trying to remove the inlet in the car. And I'm glad I did, because there is absolutely no way I would be able to remove the inlet opening off the blower in the car. First of all, the water pump's in the way right here, and second of all, the steam port that you guys can see, that's in the way as well. Those two items would prevent us from getting to the bottom bolts on the inlet snout for the supercharger. So what are we going to be doing? We've already got the 102 millimeter throttle body. I've already tested it. It fits. It bolts on the car. I have fired the car up. However, that throttle body needs to be tuned. The car will not run with that throttle body set up as it is. So that's why we're getting, this is the whole reason we're getting the car retuned, is simply because of that throttle body. And as we said, you know, so I decided to remove the blower. The hardest part was just getting access to everything, removing all the hoses, all the sensors, the fuel rail. We got the fuel rail down here. You know, the fuel rail, all that stuff is in the way because the bolts on the E Force, I'm not sure you guys can see it, but they're down here beneath the fuel rail. This is where the injector goes. So the bolts are actually behind it. So everything has to come out. And I'll show you the car. There's hoses and wiring, and there's stuff strewn everywhere. And guys, make sure you put tape over the cylinder heads, because you don't want anything falling into the cylinder head while you're doing work. I've already removed 5 of the 6 bolts for the supercharger snout. We've got it right here. I also had to pull the supercharger pulley off. You guys will see that right here. And what we have to do next is actually take this lid that we just swapped on. We have to take this off as well. The reason we have to take the lid back off is actually because to get here, we're actually going to have to flip this assembly over for this to pull out. So I've got a little bit of finagling to do. There you go. To get this out, you have to have a full path. And unfortunately, as you guys see where it says E Force, this literally sits right beneath that. So there's no way to get that out without that opening up. So there's no way to get that out without taking the lid off, which kind of sucks, but that's all right. So now that we've gotten that out, we will show you the bolts. You guys can see them. I've already taken them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This last bolt right here is actually behind the bracketry for the, I don't know if you guys call it the wastegate or the valve, the dump valve, whatever. This is to get the last bolt out. So once we get this last bolt out, we should be able to pull this out and get started on the swap. I got the supercharger torn apart. It was actually a lot easier than I thought it was. Maybe I'm just having bad memories of the LSA that I tore apart for the SS behind us. And basically, all I had to do was take all the bolts out. So there's 6 bolts. And then the last piece I had to take out was the wastegate actuator inside the supercharger, the part that goes right here. Take those two, there's 2 Phillips head screws, took that out, pulled that out, pulled the circular disc out, pulled that out, so that comes out as an assembly. And that basically gives you the freedom to start to remove this. On the E Force itself, guys, there's not a lot of places to grab from. I did put a tire iron back behind this for a second, but that didn't seem to do anything. I also put a pressure behind where this port is down here. Try to knock it loose that way, but that honestly, guys, wasn't getting anywhere. So what I ended up doing was I ended up just taking my rubber mallet and just started tapping on it, like behind the throttle by like here, a little bit here, here, and here. And I hit it. I mean, that's a rubber mallet. You're not going to do much with it. I just tapped it and with some force, but not like, you know, Hulk smash on it. But got it just enough to where it broke loose the, I don't think it's RTV, it's some kind of material that they use to seal the supercharger snout to the blower itself, and that got it apart. So, what we're going to be doing today is not a full port and polish. I'll show you why. So if you guys look inside the supercharger here, there really isn't anything to port. And what I mean by that is Edelbrock was pretty, I don't want to call them cheap, but they were pretty efficient with their mold, and there's just not a ton of material here to remove, especially back here in the blower too. As you guys can see, I mean, there's literally like almost no restriction. Maybe right here where you can kind of see that it bumps down, but I'm not going to risk hitting, you know, the air inlet port underneath, because that is a runner right there for the underneath the supercharger. And up front, as you guys can see, so it looks like there's plenty of meat, but if you guys look, see how much material they took out for the bolts. There's one there, this one right here, this channel, like there is not a ton of material here. I think this supercharger setup, we'll see this kind of gains that a ported LS9 or a ported LSA sees, like, you know, those guys see like 40 plus wheel horsepower. Edelbrock was, do I want to call it efficient? You know, they didn't waste material like the Eaton Magnuson did, just doing a real big rough casting and, you know, throwing it down the assembly line. I don't know, maybe something like that. But if you guys look, there just is not a lot of material here, like I was saying. I guess you could port if you wanted to, but I just don't think you're going to see the gains that, you know, that you might expect. So there's that. And, you know, guys, I did say I think this intercooler setup is not serviceable. I think I'm wrong by that. What do I mean by that is, I remember seeing Jeremy Formato's post, and he had the bricks removed, and he actually had ported the inside, like just the very inside opening up top. And so what I think is, you take these 3 bolts out up front. There's also a couple bolts in the back, I believe. Oh, actually there isn't. Interesting. So I think you just take these 3 bolts out from the front, here and here. That will basically remove the mechanical grip from the bricks to the blower. I think you just pull them out. I mean, you're obviously going to have to cut all of this RTV and silicone, whatever all that garbage is. I believe it's RTV. Cut all that out, and I think the brake lids will come out. So maybe there is a modification here in the future. I just don't know. Unfortunately, this is not set up like the LS9, which had like that separate brick entrance, if you want to call it that, the inlet port for the intercooler setup. So there's no like billet, like 1-inch intercooler piping that we could put on this. That kind of sucks. But you know, you might be able to take these bricks out and see what you could do. All we're really going to be doing today, guys, is gasket matching or port matching this. We're not going to do a full port and polish. We're just going to get this opening up to 102 millimeter and go from there. So my intention is only to port the first couple inches, and that's just so that we make sure that the blade on the throttle body will open up all the way and go from there. I just don't want to risk puncturing through here. Alright guys, here's my little workstation that we're going to set up for this port job. As you guys can see, I have a flashlight mounted here. I also have my Milwaukee underhood light. It's actually attached to my overhead shelf, so that's actually really convenient for providing plenty of light. We're also going to wear ear protection and just a dust mask, just because you don't want a lot of this aluminum chunks, you know, dust to go in your lungs. So basic protection. And here's kind of the port job. You guys can see I highlighted this outer lip with it's just a blue Sharpie marker, and all we're going to do is knock this lip down. And if you guys can see, there's like this inner cavity. That inner cavity is actually bigger than 102 millimeters. I think it's like 110. So all we're going to do is not eliminate this like outer edge. Then we're going to just make sure that the gasket is, you know, proper sized and go from there. So, and like I said, we're just going to do a gradual radius. So we're just going to edge this down and probably go in a couple inches, nothing too crazy, and we'll go from there. Also, I did tape up the bearing end of the blower. I just don't want any metal chips and shavings to get inside that bearing and potentially screw up anything. So, and this is what plugs into the rotor pack inside the blower. So just basic protection to protect the car. And we're going to thoroughly clean this, of course, before we put this anywhere near the supercharger. So let's go ahead and get started and get this thing ported. Before we go ahead and get started, we're simply going to be using a Dremel with various carbide tips in it. And I bought these on Amazon. I'll have a link in the description below. So various carbide tips to help get rid of this ridge, you know, that extra groove. And then various sanding disc and go from there. I may have to go out and get some more disc, you know, some more of the barrels, but at this point I think we'll be fine. Just various disc, and then eventually I think we'll finish it up with this brush. So let's go ahead and get started and get this thing flowing better. Alright guys, this is probably going to sound muffled because I have a mask on, but we got a rounded square tip on the end of it, and we're just going to go around this thing. Alright guys, we're making progress here. We've done a little bit of a time lapse for you. And as you guys can see, we're simply just knocking this lip down. We're eventually going to get rid of it, and once we get through the material, we will blend the machine groove that's next to it into it. And that'll be pretty much it. And also, one thing, I want to use some WD-40 or some kind of, liquid. And it's making it go a lot quicker. Make sure you spray the tip of the bit as well. So, alright, we'll keep going on this, and when we get some more progress, we'll catch up. So I finished the porting. We ended up getting that ring out of there. That was basically the marker for the 102. We port matched a good 3 or 4 inches into the supercharger, as you guys can see. And after we finished getting rid of that ring, I radiused it into the blower inlet, and then what I did was, so that was with the carbide tip. That carbide tip actually worked really well. I read somewhere you're supposed to dip it in, or not dip it in, but make sure you just spray WD-40 in there. So I just ended up dipping the bit into the lid every once in a while just to clear it up. And you guys could totally tell a difference as soon as you dip it in and then start porting again, start grinding. Like it actually cut. It cut through the metal, not instead of just like almost polishing it to an extent. So we did that. And then I took a rubber, the barrel with the little sanding disc on. Honestly, guys, I don't know if I had the Dremel too quick. That didn't end up doing anything. It kind of like smoothed out the raw, carbide bit scratches and porting a little bit. So it smoothed that out a little bit. But the way that was, I could only go in like an inch or two before I ran out of space and that thing started like bending, and it was, you could actually see the rubber barrel behind it onto the metal. So I didn't use that very often. And then I switched to a grinding stone, and that thing actually worked really well. I wouldn't say I used it for grinding. I used it more or less just to smooth out, the grind marks. And then that was not the final step. What I did was I took one of those stainless little attachments, one of these little brush types. I think this is like a nylon. The one I used was, I believe, stainless steel, and that actually got rid of, I think it's considered a like sanding brush almost. I don't know what grade it is. It's not anything crazy, but what I use that just to knock down the like rough edges in here. And what I mean by that, like it is rough to the touch, and it just knocked that down just a bit. And then what I came in and did, I cleaned this 4 times, guys. I first blew all the aluminum bits out with my air compressor, my 80-gallon air compressor. I used that twice, blew that out outside, just so I didn't get everywhere in the shop. And then I used, all-purpose cleaner from Adams, some rags, and I cleaned that thing 4 or 5 times. I'm not kidding. Then I went back out, blew it out again, cleaned it out again with the cleaner, the rags, and I'm 99.9% sure we got that 100% clean. Also, I blew out all the ports, so there was no hidden metal hidden inside the intake. And finally, I assembled the supercharger back together. I put the wastegate back together, put that disc in, slid that in, put this all attached, put the pulley back on, put the lid back on, and then tighten everything down. Alright guys, we finally finished getting the supercharger installed back on the car. As you guys can see, the throttle body is attached, the gasket is in. I did have to buy some hex head screws because the factory hardware will not work with this throttle body. So you have to buy some hardware for it because it didn't come with it. Everything's plug and play. I just need to find the throttle body harness. It's somewhere in here. The car's still kind of torn apart, but anyway, I have plugged the throttle body in before, so that goes right in. Nothing too crazy there. And that is kind of the final shot of what the throttle body is going to look like on the E Force with the Camaro lid on top. But that's going to be it for the throttle body. That big blue gasket is kind of hideous looking. It did come with the throttle body. However, well, by having a gasket surface all the way around, you know, that eliminates us having to put RTV and RTVing the throttle body to the actual supercharger snout. I was looking into this last night, and some people poured out the LSA snout so big on the CTSVs and the ZL1s that they recommend that you RTV the throttle body to the supercharger, and we don't want to do that. The 102 that we bought came with a gasket. It may not be a high quality gasket, but you know, we're going to give it a test and just see if it works. If it doesn't work, then, you know, obviously we'll take the throttle body back off and put a little bit of RTV on it. And if I have to, I did buy a 102 millimeter spacer. This is from ICT Billet. I think it was about $20 or $22. As you guys can see, it's just billet and blank on the back side, and the front side has a groove with a gasket in it. What we can do is actually RTV this to the blower and then screw the throttle body into this. And I've got hardware long enough to go through the throttle body, through this plate, into the supercharger. So that could be a backup plan if we have to. Like I said, this is only 20 bucks, bought on Amazon. If we have to do this, I'll let you guys know in a separate video. You know, this video is just wrapping up the porting project. So that might be something you guys need to look out for, is potentially RTVing your throttle body to your supercharger, just because there's not a good gasket sealing situation. We have a gasket. I think it'll work. We'll see. But that's going to be it for the throttle body. That's it for the porting. And I did go ahead and already open the blade all the way up, and I felt inside the supercharger, and our port match is pretty good. There might be a little bit of variance in there, but it should be fine. The last thing we need to do is make an intake for this project. So that'll be the next video, and you guys should look forward to seeing that. Beyond that, nothing too crazy here, just taking the blower apart, porting out the snout, the front of the snout, and go from there. So if you guys like the video, give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. If you want to know when I upload new content, hit the bell notification button down below. And as always, if you want to help support the channel, click the links below. Thanks guys, have a great one.